All right, let's dive right in. Picture this. I'm sitting in my home office, the kind of place where the hum of computers is louder than my own thoughts. It's late, the kind of late where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I've just slammed my laptop shut after another marathon of emails, meetings, and wrestling with the impossible, trying to get humans to Mars, keep Tesla's production lines humming, or untangle the neural lace of AI that might one day save or doom us all. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, something else is gnawing at me, something far more human, far more raw. I'm staring into the void and I'm asking a question I've never dared to voice before, not to my team, not to my friends, not even to myself. I'm asking God or the universe or whatever force is out there listening, why did I fail in 3 marriages? Why does love, the one thing that's supposed to be the pinnacle of human experience, keep crashing and burning like a rocket with a faulty O ring? This isn't the kind of thing I usually talk about. You know, me rockets, electric cars, hyperloops, boring tunnels through the earth. I'm the guy who's supposed to have answers or at least a plan to figure them out. But this is different. This is personal. This is me sitting alone in a room with nothing but my thoughts and a question that's heavier than a Falcon Heavy payload. 3 marriages, 3 failures. 3 times I thought I'd crack the code on love, only to watch it disintegrate like a bad weld under pressure. And I'm not just talking about my own pain here. I'm talking about the kids, the families, the dreams that got caught in the wreckage. I'm talking about the countless people I've seen, friends, colleagues, brilliant minds who've watched their relationships implode despite everything they thought they knew. So I'm asking, why? Why does something so beautiful, so essential, keep slipping through our fingers like sand? I wasn't expecting an answer. I'm a data guy. Um, I deal in equations, physics, first principles. You don't just ask the universe a question like that and expect a PowerPoint presentation to pop up with bullet points. But as I sat there, staring at the walls of my office, something started to shift. It wasn't a voice from the heavens or a burning bush moment. It was quieter, slower, like the pieces of a puzzle falling into place one by one. Over the next hour, as I let that question simmer, truths started to crystallize, simple, brutal, undeniable truths about why marriages fail and what it takes to make them work. I'm not saying I've got it all figured out. Hell, 3 divorces prove I'm no expert. But what I realized tonight, what I'm about to share with you, feels like the kind of clarity that could change everything, not just for me, but for anyone out there wondering why their relationships keep hitting the wall. Let's start with expectations. This is the big one, the silent killer. When I got married, each time I walked in with a mental checklist longer than a SpaceX launch protocol, I thought my partner was supposed to be my everything, my confidant, my cheerleader, my intellectual equal, my emotional anchor. I wanted them to understand me without me having to explain, to support my insane work schedule, to vibe with my obsession over colonizing Mars while also being perfectly grounded in the day to day. I wanted them to fill the gaps. I didn't even know I had loneliness, stress, the weight of trying to change the world. Sounds familiar? I bet it does. We all do this. We walk into marriage like it's a magic bullet, like finding the right person will solve all our problems, make us whole, make us happy. We treat our spouse like they're supposed to be the ultimate life hack, the one thing that'll finally make everything click. But here's the cold, hard truth I realized that's a setup for failure. No human being can carry that kind of weight. It's like expecting a single Tesla battery to power an entire city grid, it's going to fry. Marriage isn't about finding someone to complete you. You're already complete, or at least you're supposed to be. If you're walking into a relationship thinking your partner's job is to fix you, to make you feel whole, you're not just setting them up to fail, you're setting yourself up to crash. I did this. I walked into my marriages um, thinking this person will make me happy, this person will get me. And when they couldn't, when they were just as human and flawed as I got frustrated, disappointed. And I'm sure they felt the same about me. I was asking them to be God in my life, to meet every need, to never let me down. And no one, not me, not them, not anyone can live up to that. Think about it like engineering. When you design a system, you don't put all the stress on one component. You distribute the load. You build redundancy, balance, synergy. Marriage is the same. It's two people, each bringing their own strength, their own completeness, choosing to work together to build something bigger. It's not about one person carrying the other. It's about both of you carrying the mission. I've seen this in my companies. When we built the Falcon 9, every part had to do its job: propulsion, navigation, payload delivery, but no single part could do it all. If we designed it expecting one system to handle everything, we'd still be picking up pieces from a launchpad explosion. Relationships are no different. When you pile all your expectations onto your partner, you're designing a system that's doomed to fail. I want you to pause for a second and think about this. What are you expecting from your partner? Are you asking them to be your therapist, your best friend, your muse, your problem solver, all rolled into one? Are you expecting them to make you happy every single day? That's not love. That's neediness dressed up as love, and it's a recipe for disaster. I learned this the hard way, watching my marriages buckle under the weight of expectations I didn't even realize I was imposing. I remember one moment years ago, sitting across from my wife at the time, feeling this quiet resentment because she didn't get why I was spending 80 hours a week at the office. I thought she was supposed to just understand, to support me unconditionally, but I wasn't giving her the same grace. I wasn't seeing her as a person with her own dreams, her own struggles. I was seeing her as a piece of my puzzle, and when she didn't fit perfectly, I got mad. Here's what I wish I'd known then. Love isn't about finding someone who fits your blueprint. It's about two people, each whole, each flawed, choosing to build something together. It's about showing up with your strengths and your scars and saying, I'm here and I'm ready to work on this with you. When I started to see it that way, it was like a light bulb going off. I realized I'd been approaching marriage like a consumer, shopping for the perfect product, instead of like an engineer, ready to build and iterate and troubleshoot. And let me tell you, relationships need a lot of troubleshooting. So, what does this mean for you? If you're married, take a hard look at the expectations you're putting on your spouse. Are they realistic? Are you asking them to be something no human can be? If you're single, start working on yourself now. Don't wait for a partner to come along and fix you. Build your own strength, your own purpose, so that when you do meet someone, you're not looking for them to complete you. You're looking for someone to share the journey with. And if you've been through a divorce like me, don't beat yourself up for expecting too much. Learn from it. Recognize that you're enough on your own. And any relationship you build from here is about adding to that, not filling a void. This is just the start. What I realized that night sitting in my office was that expectations are only one piece of the puzzle. There's more commitment, growth, truth, purpose, forgiveness, seasons, all of it weaving together into a framework for why marriages fail and how they can succeed. I'm no guru. I'm just a guy who's crashed and burned enough times to start seeing the patterns. And I want to share them with you because I believe we can do better. We can build relationships that don't just survive but thrive, that don't just hold us together but propel us forward like a rocket breaking free of Earth's gravity. So stick with me. Let's figure this out together. All right, let's keep this rocket moving. We've talked about the question that hit me like a meteor, why my 3 marriages crashed, and why love, this thing we're all chasing, keeps blowing up for so many of us. I started to see the first piece of the puzzle, expectations. Those unrealistic demands we pile on each other, thinking a partner can be our everything, but that's just the beginning. Let's dive deeper into this idea, because if expectations are the spark that ignites the failure, they're also the weight that crushes the foundation of a relationship. And I'm going to unpack this in a way that's raw, real, and maybe a little uncomfortable because that's how we get to the truth. When I think back on my marriages, I see moments where I walked into the room with a blueprint in my head. Not a physical one, like the schematics for a Starship prototype, but a mental one, a vision of what my partner was supposed to be. I wanted someone who could keep up with my brain, which runs at a million miles an hour, jumping from neural networks to solar grids to the physics of interplanetary travel. I wanted someone who could handle my 100-hour work weeks without blinking, who'd nod and say, "Go for it, Elon," when I told them I was betting everything on a dream. I wanted someone who could make me feel invincible, like I could take on the universe and win. And you know what? I thought I was being reasonable. I thought, hey, I'm giving my all to these crazy missions. Why can't my partner do the same for me? But here's the kicker. I wasn't just asking for a partner. I was asking for a superhero. And I was blind to the fact that I was putting the same impossible pressure on them that I was putting on myself. Let me break it down. In engineering, there's a concept called overdesign. You build a bridge and you make it strong enough to hold 10 times the weight it'll ever see, just to be safe. But if you overdesign too much, you waste resources, you make it inefficient, and sometimes you create a structure so rigid it can't flex under real world stress. That's what I was doing in my relationships. I was over designing my expectations, crafting this image of a perfect partner who could handle every curveball life threw at us. I wanted them to be my co-founder in life, my emotional battery pack, my mission control, all while looking flawless and never getting tired. And when they couldn't be that, because let's be real, no one can, I get frustrated. I think, why aren't you keeping up? But the truth is, I was setting them up to fail from the start. Now, flip that around. I wasn't exactly a walk in the park either. I'm the guy who'll disappear into a factory for days, chasing a production bottleneck, or wake up at 3 a.m. to scribble equations for a new rocket design. I'd come home, brain fried, and expect my partner to just get it to understand why I was distracted, why I couldn't just sit down and have a normal dinner like a normal person. I wanted them to read my mind, to know that my silence wasn't about them, but about the weight of trying to save humanity from itself. And when they couldn't, when they needed me to show up in ways I wasn't, I'd feel like they were the ones letting me down. It's like I was running a simulation in my head where we were both supposed to be perfect. And when reality didn't match the code, I blamed the program instead of the programmer. Here's where it gets real. I started thinking about the couples I know, friends, colleagues, people I've watched navigate this messy thing called love. Almost every time a marriage fell apart, I could trace it back to this same problem: expectations that were too big, too heavy, too unfair. One friend told me his wife was supposed to make him feel valued, like his work mattered, even when he was drowning in self doubt. Another said her husband was supposed to know what she needed without her saying a word, like he was some kind of psychic. Sound familiar? We do this all the time. We walk into relationships with a laundry list of what we want the other person to be, and we forget they're human. They're not a Tesla bot programmed to our specs. They're not a Neuralink implant wired to our thoughts. They're people with their own dreams, fears, and limits. And when we expect them to be anything more than that, we're not loving them, we're demanding something they can never deliver. Let's put this in perspective. Imagine you're building a car. You want it to go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, handle like a dream, and get 500 miles of range on a single charge. But if you also demand it to fly, dive underwater, and cook you dinner, you're not designing a car anymore. You're designing a fantasy. That's what we do in relationships. We want our partner to be the whole package: romantic, practical, adventurous, stable, passionate, calm, all at once. And when they fall short, because they will, we start thinking the problem is them, not the impossible checklist we've written. I did this. I look at my wife and think, why can't you just understand why I'm working so hard? Instead of asking, am I giving you what you need to feel loved? I was so focused on what I wasn't getting that I forgot to ask what I wasn't giving. This hit me like a ton of bricks that night in my office. I realized I'd been treating marriage like a transaction, like I was entitled to a certain output if I put in the right input. But love doesn't work that way. It's not a contract where you get to demand a return on investment. It's a partnership, a collaboration where both people bring what they have and figure out how to make it work. I started thinking about SpaceX. When we design a rocket, we don't expect every component to do everything. The thrusters don't navigate, the navigation system doesn't burn fuel. Each part does its job, and together they get us to orbit. Marriage is the same. You've got to let your partner be who they are, not who you want them to be. You've got to meet them where they're at, not where you think they should be. I want to tell you about a moment that drove this home for me. In one of my marriages, I remember a fight, not a screaming match, just one of those quiet, tense conversations that cuts deeper than any shout. My wife at the time was frustrated because I was always half present, my mind somewhere between a Tesla factory and a Martian colony. She said, I just want you to be here, Elon, not in your head, not at work here. And I got defensive. I thought, I'm trying to save the world. Why can't you see that? But what she was really saying was, I'm not asking you to stop being you. I'm asking you to show up for me. I didn't get it then. I thought she was asking me to change who I was, to give up my mission. But she wasn't. She was asking me to stop expecting her to be okay with me checking out emotionally. She was asking for a partner, not a visionary who was too busy to love her. That's when I started to see the pattern. Every time I expected my partner to be something they weren't, whether it was a mind reader, a cheerleader, or a saint, I was pushing them away. And every time they expected me to be something, I wasn't like a guy who could clock out at 5 p.m. and be fully present. They were setting themselves up for disappointment. We were both guilty of it. We were both loading each other up with expectations that no human could carry. And when we couldn't deliver, we'd point fingers instead of looking in the mirror. So, what's the fix? It's not about lowering your standards or settling for less. It's about recalibrating what you're asking for. Instead of expecting your partner to be your everything, Expect them to be your teammate. Expect them to show up, to try, to grow alongside you, and expect yourself to do the same. When I started thinking this way, it was like rewriting the code for how I approach relationships. I stopped asking, what am I getting out of this? And started asking, what am I bringing to this? It's a shift from consumption to creation, from taking to building. And let me tell you, it's liberating. It's like shedding a 500-pound payload before launch. You move faster, you fly higher. I want you to think about your own life right now. If you're in a relationship, what expectations are you putting on your partner? Are you asking them to fill a void that's really your job to fill? Are you expecting them to be perfect when you're not? If you're single, are you holding out for someone who checks every box on your dream list, or are you looking for someone who's real, who's ready to work with you to build something worth having? And if you've been through a breakup or a divorce, ask yourself, were those expectations fair, or were they part of the crash? I'm not saying it's all your fault. God knows I've made my share of mistakes, but I am saying we've got to own our part in this. We've got to stop treating love like a vending machine where you put in a quarter and get exactly what you ordered. This is where the real work starts. Once you let go of those crushing expectations, you open the door to something better. A relationship built on choice, not need. A relationship where two people decide to show up, flaws and all, and build something together. That's what I missed in my marriages. I was so busy chasing the perfect outcome that I forgot to enjoy the process. I forgot that love isn't a destination, it's a journey. And it's a journey you've got to be ready to take, not as a passenger, but as a co-pilot. So here's my challenge to you. Take a hard look at the expectations you're carrying. Write them down if you have to. Be honest. Are you asking your partner to be something they can't be? Are you expecting them to make you happy when that's your job? And then flip it. Ask yourself what you're bringing to the table. Are you showing up as a partner, or are you just waiting for them to deliver? This isn't easy. It's like debugging a million lines of code. You've got to dig deep, find the errors, and rewrite them. But when you do, you start to see what's possible. You start to see a relationship that's not just surviving, but thriving, like a rocket that's finally cleared the atmosphere and is soaring into the stars. We're not done yet. Expectations are just the start. There's more to this commitment: growth, truth, purpose, forgiveness, seasons, all of it, building toward a truth that can change how you love, how you live. I'm not here to pretend I've got it all figured out. 3 marriages, 3 failures, that's not a resume for a love guru, but it's a resume for someone who's learned the hard way, who's seen the wreckage, and is starting to understand why it happened. Stick with me, because we're going to keep unpacking this piece by piece until we get to the core of what makes love work and what makes it worth fighting for. All right, we've peeled back the first layers, those crushing expectations that weigh down relationships like a poorly balanced payload on a rocket. I've told you how I walked into my marriages with a mental blueprint of what I thought my partner should be, only to realize I was setting us both up for a crash. But there's another piece to this puzzle, one that hit me even harder as I sat in that dimly lit office, wrestling with the ghosts of my 3 failed marriages. It's about commitment. Not the fluffy, romantic kind you see in movies, but the gritty, roll up your sleeves, make it work even when it sucks kind. This is where I started to see why my relationships didn't just falter, they imploded. And I'm going to lay it out for you, raw and unfiltered, because if there's one thing I've learned from building rockets and cars, it's that nothing worthwhile comes without a fight. Love is no different. Let's get one thing straight. I used to think love was a feeling, that rush you get when you meet someone who lights up your brain like a neural network firing on all cylinders. In my first marriage, I felt it, that electric spark, the sense that this was it, the answer to everything. I thought this is what it's supposed to feel like forever. Same thing with the second, and yeah, even the third. Each time I was chasing that high, that moment when everything felt perfect, like we were 2 planets aligned in a perfect orbit. But here's the problem: feelings fade. They're like solar flares, brilliant, intense, but temporary. And when they dim, when the butterflies in your stomach pack up and leave, most of us, including me, start thinking something's wrong. We think, if I don't feel that spark anymore, maybe this isn't love. Maybe I need to move on. That's where I screwed up. I let feelings drive the ship, and when the fuel ran out, I bailed instead of learning how to navigate. Here's the truth I wish I'd known sooner. Love isn't primarily a feeling. It's a decision. It's a choice you make every single day to show up, to fight for the relationship, to prioritize the person you're with even when they're driving you up the wall. It's like running SpaceX during the early days. There were moments, hell, entire years when it felt like we were one bad launch away from bankruptcy. Rockets were exploding, investors were panicking, and half the world thought I was insane for trying to make reusable rockets a reality. But we didn't quit. We doubled down. We analyzed the failures, tweaked the designs, and kept pushing. Why? Because I was committed to the mission. I chose to keep going, even when it felt hopeless. Marriage is the same. It's not about waiting for the warm fuzzies to carry you through. It's about choosing to stay, to work, to build, even when every fiber of your being wants to walk away. I remember a moment in one of my marriages, doesn't matter which one, because the pattern was the same. We were in a rough patch, the kind where every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. I was buried in work, trying to keep Tesla from going under, and I'd come home late, distracted, my brain still crunching numbers or troubleshooting production lines. My wife would try to talk, and I'd give her half answers, barely looking up from my phone. One night, she just stopped talking. She looked at me, and I could see it in her eyes, this quiet, heavy disappointment. Not anger, just sadness. And I thought, why isn't she trying harder to connect with me? But the truth was, I wasn't trying at all. I was waiting for her to make me feel something, to reignite that spark, when I should have been the one making a choice to put down the damn phone, to listen, to show up. I didn't, and that silence grew into a chasm we couldn't cross. That's when it hit me. We've got it backwards. Society tells us that commitment follows feelings. You stay because you feel love, and you leave when you don't. But that's like saying you only work on a project when you're inspired. If I'd run SpaceX that way, we'd still be grounded. Successful marriage is hell. Successful anything work the other way around. Feelings follow commitment. You choose to love, even when you're annoyed, even when you're tired, even when you're not sure you've got anything left to give. And when you make that choice day after day, something amazing happens. The feelings come back. Maybe not the same fireworks you felt at the start, but something deeper, stronger, like the steady burn of a rocket engine that can carry you to Mars. Let me give you an example from outside my own screw ups. I know a couple, both engineers, brilliant people. They've been married for 20 years, and I've seen them go through seasons that would have broken most people. A few years back, they hit a wall, job stress, kids, the usual chaos. They told me there were months when they barely spoke, when they felt like strangers sharing a house. Most people would have called it quits, said the love was gone, but they didn't. They made a decision to stick it out, to go to counseling, to have hard conversations even when it felt pointless. They chose to show up, not because they felt like it, but because they'd promised to. And you know what? They came out the other side stronger. They found a new kind of love, one built on trust and resilience, not just butterflies. That's what commitment does. It's the fuel that keeps you going through the dark until you find the light again. Now, don't get me wrong, commitment doesn't mean staying in something toxic. If you're in a relationship where there's abuse or betrayal, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the normal, messy stuff, the fights, the disconnects, the moments when you look at your partner and wonder, who the hell are you? Those are the moments where commitment matters most. It's about saying, I'm not going anywhere. Let's figure this out. It's about choosing to see your partner through compassionate eyes, even when they're not at their best. It's about deciding their well being matters as much as your own, even when it's hard. That's what I didn't do enough of. I'd get frustrated, withdraw, or throw myself into work instead of facing the problem. And every time I did that, I was choosing convenience over commitment. Let's put this in engineering terms because that's how my brain works. When you're designing a system like, say, a Tesla battery pack, you don't just build it and hope it works forever. You monitor it, you test it, you fix the cells that aren't performing. If one cell fails, you don't scrap the whole pack. You troubleshoot, you recalibrate, you make it better. Marriage is like that. It's not a one and done deal. It's a system that needs constant attention, constant recalibration. And commitment is the decision to keep working on it, even when the diagnostics come back red. I've seen this in my companies. When we had a problem with the Model 3 production line, we didn't abandon the factory. We camped out on the factory floor, figured out the bottlenecks, and kept going. Relationships need that same dogged persistence. Here's a story that drives this home. Early on at SpaceX, we had a launch that went south big time. The rocket didn't even make it to orbit. It blew up 30 seconds after liftoff. The team was gutted. We poured everything into it, and there it was, a fireball in the sky. I could have said, screw it, this is too hard. But I didn't. We went back analyzed every piece of data, rebuilt, and tried again. That's what commitment looks like in a mission, and it's what commitment looks like in a marriage. There were times in my relationships when I should have done that, sat down, faced the failure, and said, let's rebuild. Instead, I let the explosion mark the end. I'm not saying it's always salvageable, but I am saying most things are worth trying for, especially when you've made a promise. So, what does this mean for you? If you're married, ask yourself, are you choosing to show up even when it's tough? Are you making the daily decision to love even when the feelings aren't there? If you're single, are you preparing yourself to be the kind of person who can make that choice, who can stick it out when the going gets rough? And if you've been through a divorce, don't let it define you. Ask yourself what you learned about commitment, about what it takes to keep showing up. For me, I realized I'd been treating love like a sprint, chasing the high of the start line when it's really a marathon. And marathons aren't won by feeling good every step of the way. They're won by putting one foot in front of the other, no matter how much it hurts. I want to challenge you to rethink commitment. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect feeling. Start choosing your partner every day, choosing to listen, to forgive, to work through the mess. It's not glamorous. It's not a Hollywood montage. It's more like grinding through a 16-hour day at the factory, knowing every small fix is getting you closer to the goal. And the goal isn't just a happy marriage, it's a partnership that can withstand anything, that can carry you through the chaos of life and come out stronger. That's what I missed in my marriages. I was chasing the spark instead of building the engine. But I'm learning, and I want you to learn with me. We're not done yet. Commitment is just one piece of this. There's more growth, truth, purpose, forgiveness, seasons, all of it coming together to answer that question I asked in the dark. Why do marriages fail, and how do we make them work? I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. I'm here to share what I've learned from crashing and burning, from picking up the pieces and trying again. Stick with me because we're building something here, not just a relationship, but a way of living that's worth fighting for. We've been digging deep, peeling back the layers of why my three marriages didn't make it to orbit, why so many relationships, mine included, crash before they can soar. We've talked about expectations, those impossible demands we pile on each other, and commitment, the gritty choice to keep showing up even when the feelings flicker. But there's another piece to this puzzle, one that hit me like a sudden course correction in the middle of a SpaceX mission. It's about growth, personal growth. Not the kind you put on a LinkedIn profile, but the kind that makes you a better human, a better partner, a better you. This is where I started to see my failures not just as broken promises or misaligned feelings, but as moments where I stopped evolving, or worse, where I didn't even realize I needed to. Let's dive in, because this one's a game changer, and I'm going to lay it out with the same relentless clarity I use to debug a rocket's guidance system. Here's the deal. I've spent my life pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, every one of them is about refusing to accept the status quo, about saying, we can do better, we can be better. But in my marriages, I didn't always bring that same mindset. I got comfortable, or worse, distracted. I'd throw myself into work, into solving the next big problem, and assume my relationships would just coast. Like I could put them on autopilot while I was busy trying to colonize Mars. Big mistake. Relationships don't coast. They're like a living organism. They need constant care, constant evolution. And if you're not growing as a person, you're not just stalling your own progress, you're dragging your partner down with you. Let me paint you a picture. In one of my marriages, I remember a phase where I was so consumed by work, think 100-hour weeks, sleeping on the factory floor to get Model 3 production on track, that I stopped being curious about myself, about my partner, about us. Um, I wasn't reading, wasn't reflecting, wasn't asking the big questions about who I was or who I wanted to be. I was just existing, grinding through the days. And my wife at the time, she was trying to grow, trying to figure out her own path, her own dreams, but I was too busy to notice. I wasn't meeting her halfway. I wasn't challenging myself to be a better listener, a better communicator, a better human. I was stagnant, like a rocket stuck on the launch pad, and she was trying to break free of Earth's gravity. Eventually, we weren't even in the same orbit anymore. We were strangers sharing a house, and I didn't see it until it was too late. Here's the truth I realized that night in my office, staring into the void. Marriages fail when people stop growing. Not because they're bad people, but because humans are wired for progress. We're built to learn, to adapt, to become better versions of ourselves. It's why I get up every morning and push for reusable rockets or brain-computer interfaces. Stagnation feels like death to me. It's the opposite of everything I stand for. And yet, in my relationships, I let myself stagnate. I stopped asking, how can I be a better partner? How can I understand her better? How can I show up in a way that makes us both stronger? I was so focused on building the future of humanity that I forgot to build the future of my marriage. Think about it like this. A relationship is like a dual core processor. If one core stops advancing, stops updating its code, the whole system slows down. You can't have one person racing ahead, learning, growing, chasing their purpose while the other is stuck in version 1.0. It creates friction, resentment, distance. I've seen this in so many couples, not just my own story. A friend of mine, a brilliant coder, told me how his marriage started to crack when he got obsessed with his startup. He was leveling up, learning new skills, pushing his limits, but his wife felt left behind. She wasn't growing at the same pace, and he didn't notice until she started pulling away. They weren't bad people, they just weren't evolving together. They weren't syncing their updates. Now, here's the flip side, and this is where it gets interesting. Growth isn't just about you becoming a better version of yourself, it's about growing in the same direction as your partner. I'm not talking about becoming clones of each other. You don't have to share every hobby or agree on every goal, but you need a shared trajectory, a common vector. When I was married, there were times when I was so focused on my mission making humanity multiplanetary, revolutionizing transportation, that I didn't stop to ask if my partner was on board with that vision. I assumed they'd just get it, that they'd be as excited about a Martian colony as I was. But they had their own dreams, their own paths, and I wasn't paying attention. We were growing, sure, but in different directions, like two rockets launched at divergent angles. Eventually, you're light years apart. Let me give you an engineering analogy, because that's how I make sense of the world. When we design a spacecraft, every component has to work toward the same goal, getting to orbit, landing on Mars, whatever the mission island. If one part starts optimizing for a different objective, like say the landing gear decides it wants to prioritize speed over stability, the whole system fails. Marriage is like that. You and your partner don't have to be identical, but you need to be aligned on the big stuff. What's your mission as a couple? Is it raising kids who will change the world, building a business together, making a dent in the universe in your own way? If you're not growing toward a shared goal, you're just two people drifting in space, and no amount of love can keep you tethered. I want to tell you about a moment that crystallized this for me. In one of my marriages, my wife at the time was passionate about art. She'd spend hours sketching, creating, pouring her soul into her work. I admired it, but I didn't engage with it. I was too busy with my own obsessions, rocket engines, battery chemistry, AI algorithms. I didn't ask her about her art, didn't try to understand what drove her. I thought, that's her thing, I've got mine. But that was the problem. I wasn't growing toward her. I wasn't curious about her world. And over time, that lack of curiosity, that lack of shared growth built a wall between us. I realized later that if I'd taken the time to learn about her passion, to grow in a way that included her, we might have found a stronger connection. Instead, I let our paths diverge, and by the time I noticed, we were too far apart to bridge the gap. So, what does this mean for you? If you're in a relationship, ask yourself, are you still growing? Are you pushing yourself to be better, not just for you, but for your partner? Are you learning new skills, challenging your assumptions, becoming someone they can respect and admire? And just as important, are you supporting their growth? Are you cheering them on as they chase their dreams, even if those dreams don't look like yours? If you're single, this is your homework now. Don't wait for a relationship to start working on yourself. Become the kind of person you'd want to be, with curious, driven, always evolving. And if you've been through a breakup or divorce, don't let it stop you. Use it as a launch pad to grow into someone stronger, wiser, ready for the next mission. Here's a practical challenge. Pick one area of your life where you've been coasting. Maybe it's your emotional intelligence. You've been dodging those tough conversations because they're uncomfortable. Maybe it's your creativity. You've let your passions take a backseat to the daily grind. Maybe it's your empathy. You've been so focused on your own goals that you've forgotten to ask your partner what they're feeling. Whatever it is, commit to growing in that area. Read a book, take a course, have a hard conversation, do something that scares you, and then bring your partner into it. Ask them what they're working on, what they want to become. Make growth a team sport. That's what I wish I'd done more of. I was so busy building companies that I forgot to build myself, and it cost me the people I loved. Let me share one more story. I know a couple who've been married for 30 years, and they're the kind of people who make you believe in love. They're not perfect, God, no, but they're both relentless about growing. He's a scientist, always reading, always tinkering with new ideas. She's a teacher, constantly finding new ways to connect with her students. They told me once that their secret isn't that they never fight or never drift apart, it's that they never stop learning. They take classes together, travel to new places, challenge each other to think bigger. They're not just growing as individuals, they're growing toward each other, and that's kept them strong through decades of ups and downs. Watching them, I realized what I'd missed. Growth isn't just about you, it's about building a life where both of you are becoming the best versions of yourselves together. This is where the rubber meets the road. If you want a relationship that lasts, you've got to keep evolving, not just for yourself, but for the person you're with. You've got to be curious, be hungry, be willing to do the work of becoming better, and you've got to make space for your partner to do the same. That's what I'm trying to do now. Learning from my failures, pushing myself to grow in ways I didn't before. It's not easy. It's like redesigning a rocket mid-flight, but it's worth it because a life without growth is a life without progress. And a relationship without growth is a relationship that's already dying. We're not done yet. Growth is just one part of this equation. There's more to uncover: truth, purpose, forgiveness, seasons, all of it building toward a blueprint for relationships that don't just survive but change the world. I'm not here to pretend I've cracked the code. 3 marriages, 3 failures, that's proof I'm still learning. But I'm sharing this because I believe we can all do better. We can build partnerships that are as resilient as a Falcon Heavy, as transformative as a Tesla. Stick with me because we're just getting started. We've been tearing through the layers of what makes relationships work, or in my case, spectacularly crash and burn. We've tackled expectations, that invisible weight I piled on my partners, thinking they could be my everything. We've dug into commitment, the daily choice to show up, even when the spark feels like it's gone dark. And we've explored growth, the relentless drive to keep evolving, not just for yourself, but for the person you're with. But there's another piece to this, one that hit me like a sudden loss of cabin pressure in a spaceship: communication. Not the kind you read about in self-help books with buzzwords like active listening or I statements, but something deeper, rawer, more essential. Um, I'm talking about creating a space where truth can breathe, where you and your partner can say the hard things without fear of blowing the whole thing up. This is where I failed, time and again, and it's where I'm learning to do better. Let's dive in, because this one's the oxygen that keeps a marriage alive. I'm a problem solver by nature. Give me a rocket that won't launch, a battery that won't charge, or a tunnel that's too damn expensive to dig, and I'll break it down to first principles, analyze the data, and find a fix. But in my marriages, I treated communication like it was optional, like it was just noise in the system. I'd avoid the tough conversations, thinking they'd sort themselves out or that silence was better than conflict. Big mistake. Silence doesn't fix anything. It's like ignoring a fuel leak in a rocket. You might not see the problem right away, but it's going to catch fire eventually. In all 3 of my marriages, there were moments where I didn't say what I was really thinking, really feeling, because I was afraid of what would happen if I did. And when I did speak up, it was often too late or it came out wrong, like a poorly timed thruster burn that sends you off course. Here's what I realized that night, sitting alone with my thoughts: most marriages don't fail because people lie outright. They fail because people stop telling the truth, not because they want to deceive, but because it feels unsafe to be honest. Somewhere along the way in each of my relationships, we stopped being real with each other. Maybe it was because I'd get defensive when my wife called me out for being distant. Maybe it was because she'd shut down when I tried to talk about something that wasn't working. Either way, we built these invisible walls, brick by brick, until we couldn't see each other anymore. And when you can't tell your partner what's really going on, your fears, your needs, your frustrations, you're not married to them. You're married to a version of yourself you think they'll accept. That's not a relationship, it's a performance. Let me take you back to a moment that still stings. In one of my marriages, there was a night when we were sitting at dinner, the kids asleep, the house quiet except for the hum of the city outside. I could tell something was bothering her. She was picking at her food, avoiding my eyes. I asked, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing." Classic, right? But I knew it wasn't nothing. I could have pushed, could have said, "Come on, tell me the truth." But I didn't. I let it slide because I was tired, because I didn't want to fight, because I was already half thinking about a production issue at Tesla. A week later, that nothing turned into a full-blown argument, one of those moments where all the unspoken things come pouring out like a dam breaking. She told me She felt invisible, like I didn't see her anymore. And you know what? She was right. But I hadn't created a space where she could tell me that sooner, where she could say, Elon, I'm struggling here, without worrying I'd brush it off or get defensive. I hadn't made truth safe. Here's the thing: communication in a marriage isn't about talking more or picking the right words. It's about building a space where both of you can say the scary stuff, the stuff that makes you vulnerable, the stuff that might hurt, and know you'll be met with understanding, not judgment. It's like designing a spacecraft. You don't just slap components together and hope they work. You create a system where every part can send and receive signals clearly, where errors are caught early, where the data flows without interference. If the communication lines between mission control and the rocket go down, you're not getting to Mars. If the communication lines between you and your partner go down, you're not staying married. I've seen this in other couples too. A colleague of mine, one of the sharpest minds at Neuralink, told me about his marriage falling apart. He said it wasn't one big betrayal, just a slow erosion. He stopped telling his wife when he was stressed about work because he didn't want to burden her. She stopped telling him when she felt neglected because she didn't want to seem needy. They both thought they were protecting each other, but they were just building a bigger gap. Eventually, they didn't know each other anymore. The truth had nowhere to go, so it suffocated. I've been there. In my second marriage, I remember avoiding a conversation about how my work was pulling me away from the family. I thought, she knows I'm doing this for us, for the future. But I never asked her how she felt about it. I never gave her a chance to say, I'm proud of you, but I miss you. And that silence grew into resentment until we were fighting about everything except the real problem. Let's put this in engineering terms, because that's how I think. When we built the Falcon Heavy, we had to make sure every system could talk to every other system: guidance, propulsion, telemetry, all of it. If one system stopped sending data, or if it sent garbled signals, the whole mission was at risk. Marriage is no different. You need clear, honest communication, and that means creating a space where truth is safe. That's not easy. It means swallowing your pride, admitting when you're wrong, listening when you'd rather argue. It means being okay with discomfort because the truth is rarely comfortable, but it's necessary. A marriage can only be as strong as the truth it can handle. Here's a practical example. In one of my relationships, we had a recurring fight about time. I'd be at the office until midnight, and she'd be upset that I wasn't home. I'd say, I'm building something bigger than us. Don't you get it? And she'd fire back, you're choosing work over me. Neither of us was wrong, but we weren't really hearing each other. What I should have done was sit down and say, okay, let's get real. I'm driven to do this work, but I don't want you to feel like you're second place. How do we make this work? That would have been truth. That would have been communication. Instead, I let it fester, and she did too, until the gap was too wide to bridge. If I'd created a space where we could both say what we needed without fear of judgment, we might have found a way forward. So, how do you do this? How do you build a marriage where truth is the oxygen? It starts with small steps. Next time you're tempted to say, I'm fine when you're not, stop. Take a breath and say what's really on your mind, even if it's messy. If your partner's pulling away, don't let it slide. Ask them what's going on and mean it. And when they tell you something hard, don't jump to defend yourself. Listen, really listen. It's like debugging code. You don't fix the bug by arguing with it. You figure out what it's telling you. And just as important, make it safe for your partner to tell the truth. If they say something that stings, don't shut them down. Thank them for being honest, even if it hurts. That's how you build trust. That's how you keep the lines open. I want to share one more story because this one stuck with me. I know a couple who've been together for 15 years, and they've got this ritual that I wish I'd known about sooner. Every Sunday, they sit down with a cup of coffee and have what they call a truth hour. No phones, no distractions, just the two of them talking about whatever's on their minds, good, bad, or ugly. They've told me about times when those conversations were brutal, when one of them admitted to feeling neglected or angry or lost. But they kept doing it because they'd made a pact to always tell the truth, no matter how hard. And you know what? Their marriage isn't perfect, but it's strong. Because they built a system where truth can flow freely, where problems get aired out before they turn into disasters. If I'd done that in my marriages, things might have turned out differently. There were so many moments where I should have said, I'm struggling to balance work and has helped me figure this out, or where I should have asked, what do you need from me right now? Instead, I kept things bottled up, thinking I was protecting the relationship when I was really starving it of oxygen. I'm not saying it would have saved every marriage. Sometimes things just don't work, but I know it would have given us a fighting chance. So here's my challenge to you. If you're in a relationship, Start building that space for truth. Next time you're tempted to avoid a hard conversation, lean into it. Say the thing you're afraid to say and make it safe for your partner to do the same. If you're single, practice this now with friends, with family. Learn to be honest, to listen, to create trust. And if you've been through a breakup or divorce, ask yourself, did you make it safe for truth in that relationship? If not, what can you do differently next time? This isn't easy. It's like recalibrating a satellite in orbit, one wrong move, and you're off course. But it's worth it because a marriage without truth is a marriage that's already running out of air. We're not done yet. Truth is just one piece of this puzzle. There's more to uncover: purpose, forgiveness, seasons, all of it, building toward a framework for relationships that don't just limp along but thrive, like a spacecraft hitting its perfect trajectory. I'm not here to pretend I've got all the answers. 3 marriages, 3 failures, that's my track record. But I'm learning and I'm sharing this because I believe we can all build something better. Stick with me because we're getting closer to the core of what makes love worth fighting for. We've been on a hell of a journey, peeling back the layers of why my 3 marriages didn't make it past the launch pad. We've tackled expectations, those impossible demands I piled on my partners, thinking they could be my everything. We've dug into commitment, the gritty choice to keep showing up when the feelings fade. We've explored growth, the need to keep evolving as individuals, to keep a relationship alive. And we've hit on communication, the oxygen of truth that keeps a marriage breathing. But there's another piece to this puzzle, one that hit me like a sudden shift in trajectory when I was wrestling with that question in the dark. Why do marriages fail? This time, it's about purpose, not just your purpose or your partner's, but a shared purpose, a mission that's bigger than both of you. This is where I started to see my failures not just as personal missteps, but as a lack of something larger to hold us together. Let's dive in, because this one's about building something that can withstand the chaos of life. I've spent my life chasing missions that seem impossible, making humanity a multiplanetary species, revolutionizing transportation, rewiring the human brain. Every day I wake up driven by a purpose that's bigger than me, something that keeps me going even when the odds are stacked against us. But in my marriages, I didn't always bring that same sense of mission. I treated the relationship like it was supposed to be its own endgame, like the point was just to be happy, to feel good. And when the happiness ran dry, as it always does, because happiness is a fleeting fuel, I didn't have anything bigger to fall back on. I didn't realize that a marriage needs a purpose, a reason for existing beyond just keeping two people content. Without that, it's like a rocket without a destination you might launch, but you're just drifting in space. Let me take you back to a moment that made this painfully clear. In one of my marriages, we had everything going for us, at least on paper. We had love, we had kids, we had a life that looked good from the outside. But there was this undercurrent of disconnection, like we were two satellites orbiting the same planet but never quite syncing up. I was consumed by my work, SpaceX was fighting to survive, Tesla was bleeding cash, and I assumed she'd just get on board with my mission. I thought, this is for us, for the future, for humanity, but I never asked her what our mission was as a couple. I never stopped to say, what are we building together? What's our shared goal? And she had her own passions, her own dreams, but I was too busy chasing mine to notice. We weren't working toward something bigger than ourselves. And without that, our relationship became about meeting each other's needs or failing to. It became a transaction, not a partnership. Here's the truth I realized that night, sitting in my office with nothing but the hum of computers and my own thoughts. Marriages that last don't just exist for the happiness of the two people in them. They're built on a shared purpose, a mission that gives the relationship meaning. It doesn't have to be something as grandiose as colonizing Mars. It could be raising kids who will make the world better, creating a home that's a sanctuary for your family, or working together on a cause you both care about, whether it's art, charity, or just making your community a better place. When you have a shared purpose, it's like locking in a flight path for a spacecraft. It keeps you aligned even when the turbulence hits. Without it, you're just two people trying to keep each other happy. And that's a fragile foundation because happiness is temporary, needs change, and feelings come and go. Think about it like engineering a system. When we built the Falcon Heavy, every component had to serve the same goal, getting a massive payload to orbit. If the boosters were optimizing for speed while the core stage was focused on stability, the whole thing would have torn itself apart. Marriage is the same. You and your partner need a common mission, something that binds your strengths and covers your weaknesses. I've seen this in couples who've made it work. One of my engineers at SpaceX is married to a doctor, and their shared purpose is raising their kids to be curious, compassionate problem solvers. They don't just parent, they're on a mission to shape the next generation. When things get tough, when they're exhausted or arguing, they come back to that purpose. It's their North Star, keeping them aligned even when life tries to pull them apart. Let me share a story that drove this home. In my second marriage, there was a moment when we came close to finding that shared purpose. We were working on a project together, not a business, just something personal, a small charity initiative to help kids get access to STEM education. For a while, it felt like we were in sync, like we were building something that mattered. I'd see her light up talking about the impact we could have, and I'd feel this connection that went beyond just being a couple. It was like we were a team, like we were part of something bigger. But then life got in the way, work piled up, schedules clashed, and I let that project slip. I went back to my own mission, assuming she'd follow along, and that was the mistake. I didn't nurture that shared purpose, didn't make it a priority. Without it, we fell back into chasing individual happiness, and the cracks started to show. Here's where it gets practical. A shared purpose doesn't just happen, you have to build it, like you'd build a prototype. You have to sit down with your partner and ask, what are we doing together? What's our mission? Maybe it's creating a home where creativity thrives. Maybe it's volunteering together or starting a side hustle that reflects your values. Maybe it's as simple as committing to be the kind of couple who lifts up everyone around them. Whatever it is, it has to be bigger than just staying happy. Happiness is a byproduct, not the goal. When I look back at my marriages, I see moments where we could have found that purpose, times when we were aligned on something meaningful, like raising our kids or supporting a cause. But I didn't lean into those moments. I let them pass, thinking the relationship could survive on love alone. It can't. Love needs a mission to keep it grounded. Let's put this in engineering terms, because that's how my brain works. When we design a spacecraft, every part is oriented toward the same objective. The thrusters, the guidance system, the payload, they all serve the mission. If one part starts working against the others, the whole thing fails. In a marriage, your shared purpose is the mission. It's what keeps you and your partner pulling in the same direction, even when life gets messy. Without it, you're just two people trying to optimize for your own needs. And that's a recipe for drift. I've seen this in my companies. When the team at Tesla was building the Model S, we weren't just making a car, we were on a mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That shared purpose kept us going through sleepless nights and near bankruptcy. Marriage needs that same kind of glue, that sense of we're in this for something bigger. End of quote. I want to tell you about a couple I know who embody this. They're not famous, just regular folks, a teacher and a mechanic. Their shared purpose is simple but powerful. They want to make their small town a better place. They volunteer at the local community center, organize cleanups, mentor kids. It's not glamorous, but it gives their marriage a backbone. When they fight, and they do, they come back to that purpose. It reminds them why they're together, what they're building. Watching them, I realized what I'd missed in my own relationships. I was so focused on my individual mission changing the world, one rocket at a time, that I didn't stop to ask, what's our mission as a couple? If I had, maybe we'd have found something to hold on to when the storms hit. So what does this mean for you? If you're in a relationship, sit down with your partner and ask the big question, what are we building together? Don't settle for, we just want to be happy. Dig deeper. Is it a family that reflects your values? A project that excites you both? A legacy you want to leave behind? If you're single, start thinking about what kind of purpose you'd want to share with a partner. What's the mission that would make you both light up? And if you've been through a divorce like me, ask yourself, did your relationship have a shared purpose? If not, what can you do differently next time? This isn't about finding someone who shares every interest. It's about finding someone who shares your why, your reason for getting up in the morning. Here's a challenge. This week, have a conversation with your partner or with yourself if you're single about your mission. Write it down if you have to, make it concrete, and then start taking steps toward it together. It could be as small as volunteering for a local cause or as big as starting a business. The point is, it gives your relationship a reason to exist beyond just feeling good. That's what I wish I'd done more of. There were moments in my marriages where we had glimpses of that purpose, working on a project, dreaming about the future, but I didn't nurture it. I let it slip, thinking love alone was enough. It's not. Love needs a mission to keep it alive. We're not done yet. Purpose is just one piece of this. There's more to unpack: forgiveness, seasons, the things that make a relationship not just survive, but soar. I'm not here to pretend I've got it all figured out. 3 marriages, 3 failures, that's my track record. But I'm learning, And I'm sharing this because I believe we can build relationships that are as resilient as a Tesla battery, as ambitious as a Starship launch. Stick with me because we're getting closer to the core of what makes love worth fighting for. We've been tearing through the wreckage of my 3 failed marriages, piecing together why something as vital as love can crash so spectacularly. We've tackled expectations, those crushing demands I'd put on my partners, thinking they could fill every gap in my life. We've dug into commitment, the daily grind of choosing to show up when the feelings flicker. We've explored growth, the need to keep evolving as individuals, to keep a relationship alive. We've hit communication, the oxygen of truth that lets a marriage breathe. And we've talked about purpose, the shared mission that gives a relationship its backbone. But there's one final piece to this puzzle, one that hit me like a course correction in deep space: forgiveness and the seasons of love. This is about understanding that love isn't a straight line, it's a cycle, a journey that ebbs and flows, and it demands a kind of forgiveness that looks forward, not just backward. This is where I failed most profoundly, and it's where I'm learning to rebuild. Let's dive in, because this one's about embracing the long haul, the way you'd embrace a mission to Mars. I'm a guy who thrives on solving problems. Give me a rocket that won't launch, and I'll break it down to first principles, find the flaw, and fix it. But in my marriages, I didn't always apply that same rigor to forgiveness. I'd hold on to grudges, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to let go. I'd replay arguments in my head, cataloging every slight, every moment where I felt let down. And when I was the one screwing up, missing dinners, zoning out during conversations, prioritizing a factory crisis over my family, I'd expect forgiveness without really earning it. I didn't understand that forgiveness isn't just saying sorry and moving on. It's a deeper act, a choice to see your partner not as the sum of their mistakes, but as someone who's trying, just like you, to be better. That's what I missed, and it cost me. Here's the truth that hit me that night in my office, staring into the void. Every marriage is a union of two broken people learning how to love. You're going to mess up. Your partner's going to mess up. You'll hurt each other, not because you're cruel, but because you're human. The question isn't whether mistakes will happen, it's what you do when they do. In my marriages, I didn't always forgive well. I'd say I forgave, but deep down, I'd hold on to the hurt like a bug in the code I couldn't let go of. And when I was the one needing forgiveness, I'd sometimes brush it off, thinking, they know I'm trying to save the world, cut me some slack. But that's not how forgiveness works. It's not a transaction. It's a commitment to see the person your partner is becoming, not just the person they've been. Let me take you back to a moment that still haunts me. In one of my marriages, we had a fight, nothing explosive, just one of those slow burn arguments that leaves you both exhausted. I'd been working late again, and she was fed up, feeling like she was raising the kids alone. I got defensive, said something like, I'm doing this for us, for the future. But she looked at me and said, I don't need a future on Mars. I need you here now. I didn't hear her, not really. I held on to that argument, let it fester, thinking she didn't get my mission. And when I screwed up, when I missed another family moment, I didn't really apologize. I just assumed she'd get over it. I didn't forgive her for being frustrated, and I didn't give her a reason to forgive me. That lack of forgiveness, on both sides, built a wall we couldn't climb over. Here's where it gets deeper. Forgiveness in a marriage isn't just about letting go of past hurts. It's about forgiving forward, choosing to believe in your partner's potential, even when they fall short. It's like debugging a rocket software. You don't just fix the error that caused the last crash. You anticipate the next one, knowing the system isn't perfect, but trusting it can get better. In my marriages, I didn't do enough of that forward-looking forgiveness. I'd get stuck on what went wrong instead of focusing on what we could become. And when I was the one needing forgiveness, I didn't always make it easy. I'd minimize my mistakes or expect a free pass because of my big picture goals. That was a mistake. Forgiveness requires humility, and I wasn't always humble. Now, let's talk about seasons, because this is the other half of this equation. I used to think a marriage was supposed to feel the same all the time, like that initial rush of love was the benchmark, and anything less meant something was broken. But that's not how it works. Marriages have seasons, just like the earth. There are summers of passion where everything feels alive and electric. There are autumns of transition where things shift and you're figuring out what's next. There are winters where it feels cold, distant, even dead. And there are springs where new growth emerges stronger than before. In my marriages, I didn't understand this. When we hit a winter, those stretches where we felt disconnected, where the warmth was gone, I thought it was over. I didn't realize it was just a season. and seasons change if you're willing to wait and work. I remember a winter in one of my marriages, a time when we barely talked. Work was consuming me, SpaceX was on the brink, Tesla was a mess, and I'd come home late, if at all. She'd be there, holding down the fort, but we were like two ships passing in the fog. I thought, this isn't working, we've lost it. But looking back, I see it wasn't the end, it was a season. If I'd recognized that, if I'd said, this is hard, but let's keep going, we might have made it to spring. Instead, I gave up thinking winter was forever. I've seen this in other couples too. A friend of mine went through a year where he and his wife were like roommates, barely connecting, just surviving. But they stuck it out, worked through it, and came out stronger. They understood that winter doesn't mean death. It means rest, preparation, a chance to rebuild. Let's put this in engineering terms because that's how I make sense of the world. When we launch a rocket, we don't expect it to fly at the same speed the whole way. There's liftoff, where everything's intense and full of energy. There's the climb, where you're burning fuel and fighting gravity. There's orbit, where things stabilize. And sometimes there's reentry, where it's bumpy and you're not sure you'll make it. Marriage is like that. You can't expect every phase to feel like liftoff. The winters, the tough seasons are part of the journey. The question is whether you'll cut and run or trust that spring is coming. Forgiveness is what gets you through those winters. It's the fuel that keeps you going when the system feels like it's failing. Here's a story that drives this home. I know a couple who've been married for 25 years, and they've been through every season you can imagine. They told me about a time when they hit a brutal winter, job loss, health issues, the works. They were barely speaking, and everyone thought they'd split. But they made a choice to forgive each other, not just for the fights, but for the fact that they were both going to keep screwing up. They started small, apologizing for the little things, owning their mistakes, giving each other grace for the future, and slowly, they found their way back to spring. Their marriage isn't perfect, but it's resilient because they learned to forgive forward and trust the seasons. So, what does this mean for you? If you're in a relationship, practice forgiveness not just for the past, but for the future. When your partner messes up, don't just let it go. Choose to see them as someone who's trying to grow. And when you mess up, own it. Apologize like you mean it and show them you're working to be better. If you're single, start practicing this now with friends, family, yourself. Learn to forgive because you'll need it when you're in a relationship. And if you've been through a divorce like me, don't let the guilt define you. Forgive yourself, forgive your ex, and use those lessons to build something stronger next time. Here's a challenge. This week, forgive someone in your life. Maybe it's your partner for something small, like forgetting a promise. Maybe it's yourself for not being perfect. Start small, but make it real. And then think about the season you're in. If it's winter, don't give up. Do the work, forgive, talk, rebuild, and trust that spring is coming. That's what I wish I'd done more of. In my marriages, I let winter define the story instead of fighting for the next season. I'm learning now, and I want you to learn with me. This is the final piece of the puzzle. Expectations, commitment, growth, communication, purpose, forgiveness, seasons, they all come together to answer that question I asked in the dark. Why do marriages fail, and how do we make them work? I'm not here to say I've cracked the code. 3 marriages, 3 failures, that's my resume. But I'm sharing this because I believe we can build relationships that don't just survive, but change the world one act of love at a time. So go out there, forgive fiercely, embrace the seasons, and build something worth fighting for.